I'm going to share my screen and look at some poems by Roscoe. So, the book, here it is. So, we read the first, really focused on the first half, and we didn't focus on actually seeing and listening to Roscoe the first time. So I thought we would do that this time. However, wanted to start with a couple poems that I don't think I had. There's a recording of him reading. So this first one is on page 5959. Have I shared that? Have we done this poem in the class before? I don't think so. I'm very fond of this poem, and I first encountered it before I owned the book. So I'm wondering if maybe we had. Anyway, it's all right. We can do it again twice and think of it as part of this entire book. All right. I think that it's an interesting poem because it's, how can I put this? There's a sense in which it seems to me that Roscoe begins someplace, either Roscoe begins someplace very everyday and kind of objective, and then slips into the subjective, or as in the case with this poem, he begins in the subjective, mother sadness, and then transitions into nature, everyday images, right? He has a way of slipping between registers, kind of. And so like the poems right before this were about horses and ants, A-N-T-S, not A-U-N-T-S. And it seems to me that that kind of like, and in those poems that are more objective, or like an ode to drinking water from my hands, seems to just be like about this thing, but really becomes about his grandfather, which we're going to look at in a minute. So this poem about his mother seems to be about himself and about nature and other things. Okay, so. And this is one of those poems that begins with a title that is in fact part of the first line. Ending the estrangement from my mother's sadness, which was to me unbearable until it felt to me not like what I thought it felt like to her, and so felt inside myself, like death, like dying, which I would almost have rather done, though adding to her sadness would rather die than do. But by being still like what in fact it was, excuse me, let me do that again. But by sitting still like what in fact it was, a form of gratitude, which when last it came, drifted like a meadow lit by torches of cardinal flower, one of whose crimson blooms, when a hummingbird hovered nearby, I slipped into my mouth, thereby coaxing the bird to scrawl on my tongue, its heart's frenzy, its fleet nectar questing song, with whom, with you, dear mother, I now sing along. I'm very much enamored of this poem for several reasons. So, but maybe I'd like to hear what you guys think about it, and your sort of thoughts.
I really liked how close he seems with his mother.
Mhm.
Just like how you rather keep your emotions to yourself instead of adding it to someone else's what they're already going through, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. So that is close. It's really ethical, right? It's like on the one hand, to have been to have been estranged from her sadness was probably a strategy to keep alive and to be himself, right? You know what I mean? You, in a certain sense, I suppose I hope my kids estrange themselves from my sadness, right? Um, but when he then takes it on, there's this complicated ethical dilemma. I think that you're talking about, Katie, right? Where he said that it felt so unbearable once he took it on that he felt like he would rather, he would almost, it felt like death, and he would almost want to die, rather die than feel her sadness. Although to die would cause her more sadness, so he would rather not do it, right? So it's very, there's a little pun there. I'd rather die than die. But other things, you guys?
I agree. Like, I really like how it is his poem, and he could have written like however he wanted. Like, it's about your feelings, it's your poem, but he still took his mother's feelings into consideration while he was writing. Like,
Mm-hmm.
and then like the line where he does say like though adding to her sadness would rather die than do. Like, I don't know. I just like that line a lot.
Yeah, yeah. You know, the reversal of, it's not a reversal, but it begins with the mother in the third person and ends with an apostrophe to the mother, you know, a direct address to the mother. With you, dear mother, um, I now sing along. Does anybody know what uh, cardinal flowers look like? They're amazing. I can't believe that there's actually a um, field of them. I looked them up once before. Maybe it's just because all pictures are great, you know, like, but I was like, oh my God, they're beautiful, right? They're quite beautiful wildflowers, right? Miguel or Adriana, do you have like favorite lines or things you want to sort of say?
Um, I really like the part about the hummingbird and how he slips it into his mouth there by coaxing the bird to scrawl on my tongue. It's heart frenzy. I don't know. When I think of a hummingbird, obviously I don't know like I'd have to think like harder to find the significance of the hummingbird.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But I picture like cuz their wings like beat really fast.
Yeah.
And I don't know, maybe it's like a loss of control or something and he's like trying to silence it. I don't know.
But well, you know what's funny is like I read this poem so many times and thought it was the cardinal he slips into his mouth. I think it's the flower he slips into his mouth to coax the cardinal to write on his tongue. Um, and so it's like it's very interesting. It's like uh, it's almost as though it's almost as though he is offering a part of himself to become part of her song or something. Miguel, do you have any thoughts or ideas about this poem? things you like about it or questions? Or
I really like the line "drifted like a meadow lit by torches of cardinal flower,
yeah,
one of whose crimson blooms."
right.
I just really like.
I you know what I like too, Miguel, is like it's really hard to because of the way Ross Gay writes, which you guys have probably picked up on already, which is that one image flows into another image. Does that, you know what I mean? Or one like line flows into the other. It's almost impossible to stop reading. Like when you're trying to read a section, you know, I like that one line that goes da 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 da, and then you're like, because it builds on itself. So you're right. They're all connected, like little threads running through these images and thoughts. The mother's sadness was a form of gratitude, which, when it came last, drifted like a meadow lit by torches of cardinal flowers, one of whose crimson blooms. So it just keeps going, right? I guess it's a single sentence, which is the other thing about the poem. I think the other thing to say is that the other thing I like about him is how vulnerable he can be, sometimes by saying very intimate and self-revealing things, and then other times by doing things that are borderline corny, like rhyming song with along to end the poem, you know. But it works. You know, he takes it right to that edge, and then I think it really works. All right. Let's see if we can find a version of him reading Ode to Drinking Water from my hands. I'm not sure. Huh. Reacting to myself drinking water. No, that's not what we're looking for. Okay, so let's just do this one, and then we'll do the final one with him reading. Okay. This is on my page. My page 78. Let's see, Adriana, would you mind reading it?
Which today in the garden I'd forgotten, I'd known and more forgotten. I'd learned and was taught this by my grandfather, who in the midst of arranging and watering the small bouquets on mostly the freshest graves saw my thirst, and cranked the rusty red pump, bringing forth from what sounded like the gravelly throat of an animal a frigid torrent, and with his hand made a lagoon, from which he drank, and then I drank, or before he cranked again, making of my hands now a fountain in which I can see the silty bottom, drifting while I drink, and my grandfather waters the flowers on the graves, among which are his and his wife's, unfinished and patient, glistening after he rinses the bird shit from his wife's, and the pump exhales, and I drink to the bottom of my fountain and join him in his work.
Great, thank you. So this entire poem is really a flashback, you know, with the exception of the first 4 lines, maybe, or 5 or 6, depending on how you think about it. Do you guys have thoughts or things that stood out?
He writes very much like a narrative, like for most of his
Yes.
poems, like very like story, like.
Yes. Yes, I think that's.
I like that a lot.
Yeah, I do too. I think it's hard for me to do without feeling like I'm. This is what I meant about his vulnerability and his riskiness. Part of his vulnerability and his riskiness is just the naivete of the way in which he sees the world and writes about it without any kind of fancy talk, without any kind of like intense images, you know, without any kind of like, yeah, but yet still captures such, you know. Mhm. There's a there is in my field of romanticism the idea that what the romantics were doing is re-enchanting the world. So the idea is that with the Enlightenment comes a kind of disenchantment of the world, where the world is suddenly disenchanted and no longer sacred, and the work of poetry, say critics of Romanticism, not critics, but romantic thinkers, is to restore the sacred. And this book of poems really seems to be like taking this seriously, like I'm going to restore that sacred to everything. You know, buttoning my shirt, drinking water from my hands, eating figs off a tree, dealing with my mother's sadness. Anybody else on this poem?
I had a quick question. At
Please.
the end,
Yes.
it says that he waters the flowers on the graves, among which are his and his wife's unfinished and patient. So are there flowers on their graves or just the graves around him?
I always figured that that what he was doing is caring for his, probably, I always assumed that his wife had passed, that the grandmother was dead and the grandfather was alive, and that they had bought side-by-side plots, And I mean, it's an interesting, it's interesting because what he has clearly done is he's compressed when he says watering the graves, and he's cleaning the grave stones, I think, not the graves, right? So the gravestone for the father, I think in almost any tradition, if you raise a stone when somebody's alive, I don't think you do that. I don't think you put the stone in until the person is dead. So he's really cleaning the wife's stone and the others around him. Or I could be wrong. It could be that in some traditions you put the stone up and maybe don't carve it. I don't know, but I think in most traditions the gravestone is not put up until the person is dead. So it's an interesting question. I think it's in his memory, he's remembering all of this, and he's probably a child, and remember. And the way he thinks about it is that then he helps his grandfather clean the graves and water the flowers. I would not drink that water. I'm just saying, I'm just saying, out of a hose, like, in a suburban yard, maybe, but like out of an old well, rusty well, I don't think I would do it. No es potable. Somebody else?
It's actually funny that you say that, because we had a well growing up.
Yes.
And it was very rusty, and we still drank out of it. But it's just kind of weird, because I remember when it was like summer and really hot, like that would be so refreshing. So I think it's interesting that he's sharing this experience with his grandfather, and they're drinking this water, and then the flowers get this water. And I don't know, I think it's a really cool experience, even though it's really sad, I guess.
No. I mean, I'm a city boy, Katie, so you just have to forgive me. Like, I'm like, it's just, when I first moved to like sort of near the country, even where it was quiet at night, it really bothered me. There were no traffic, there were no sirens, there were no gunshots. I was like, this makes me very nervous. But like, in any case, the whole pump thing, I think, is really, and the fact that it brought you back to a memory is really interesting to me. And I think this is the gift of these poems. And the other thing I think I understood you to be sort of saying is that without any kind of corniness, he's able to sort of talk about the kind of interconnectedness of all things in these poems.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was trying to say, but I couldn't find that word.
No, I felt it. I'm with you there. And even so much when he says he drinks to the bottom of his fountain, doesn't he? Bottom of my fountain, yes. So I don't know what that means, right? And the pump exhales and I drink to the bottom of my fountain. Obviously, it's not the end of the well. So it's like he has a fountain of memory or a fountain of life. He's drinking from a different kind of fountain. And I really hadn't thought of that, how cool it must be, right? Am I right, Katie, with a K? The water's very cold, right? Because it's like way down in
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, that must feel great. Okay. Anybody else?
You said you were confused about like the drinking to the bottom of his fountain or something?
Yes, right here.
Up further, it says, making of my, before he cranked
Oh,
again, making
his
of my
hands are the fountain.
Yeah.
His hands are the fountain. Thank you, Adriana. That's not. I see. My confusion is like I don't know a well from the fountain. If it isn't in the drawer of my refrigerator, so I can just stick my glass in there, I don't even know what it is. Yeah, that's really helpful. This is his fountain. Ah. Mm. And drinking water from your hands. Isn't this also like a? Don't people sometimes hold their hands like this in prayer?
Yeah, I think you're supposed to do that. I mean, personally, when I go to like church, which isn't a lot, like when you get communion, you go like this too, I think.
Yes. Beautiful, yeah. All right, so the good news is we get to hear Ross Gay read his own work now, because he's done many readings of Catalog of Unabashed Gratitude. And my question to you is like, would you prefer to hear him read it with music or without music? We could, because the music is by Bon Iver, and Ben, you know, Ben sort of, you know, whatever he got me up on it, and I realized that it was actually that they had done this thing. But which would you prefer? Do you think? Anybody have a preference?
As long as anybody else doesn't care, I really like Bon Iver, so the music.
Right. Let's do a little bit of him reading it, and then we'll switch to the other one so we get both. I was realizing we have time. We can definitely do both. So.
This is called Catalog.
Can everybody hear? Hello? Can you guys hear?
Talking about Unabashed Gratitude.
Yeah, I could hear.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
And the two things you need to know, Sarah mentioned that I work with this community orchard in Bloomington. It's a real thing. You should go there now. Like, things are starting to flower. It's incredible. And it is really, it's an acre of land. Someone just dreamt it up, and then a bunch of people dreamt it with her, and then we built it. We built it, and it's there, and you can go in. There's not a lock on the gate. The other thing is that there's a kid that I reference who was not a kid yet. Her name's Era Lee. Now she's a kid. Catalog of Unabashed Gratitude. Friends, will you bear with me today, for I have awakened from a dream in which a robin made with its shabby wings a kind of veil, behind which it shimmied and stomped something from the south of Spain, its breast aflare, looking me dead in the eye, from the branch that grew into my window, coochie-cooing my chin. The bird shuffling its little talons left, then right, while the leaves bristled against the plaster wall, two of them drifting onto my blanket, while the bird opened and closed its wings like a matador, giving up on murder, jutting its beak, turning a circle and flashing again the ruddy bombast of its breast, by which I knew upon waking it was telling me in no uncertain terms to bellow forth the tubas and sousaphones, the whole rusty brass band of gratitude not quite dormant in my belly. It said so in a human voice. Bellow forth. And who among us could ignore such odd and precise counsel? Hear ye! Hear ye, I am here to holler that I have hauled tons, by which I don't mean lots, I mean tons of cow shit, and stood ankle deep in swales of maggots swirling the spent beer grains the brewery man was good enough to dump off, holding his nose, for they smell very bad, but make the compost ride giddy and lick its lips, twirling dung with my pitchfork again and again with hundreds and hundreds of other people we dreamt an orchard this way, furrowing our brows and hauling our wheelbarrows and sweating through our shirts. And less than a year later, there was a party at which trees were sunk into the well-fed earth, one of which, a Liberty apple, after being watered in, was tamped by a baby, barefoot with a bow hanging in her hair, biting her lip in her joyous work. And friends, this is the realest place I know. It makes me squirm like a worm. I am so grateful. You can ride your bike there, or roller skate, or catch the bus. There's a fence and a gate twisted by hand. There's a fig tree taller than you in Indiana. It will make you gasp. It might make you want to stay alive even. Thank you. And thank you for not taking my pal when the engine of his mind dragged him to swig fistfuls of Xanax and a bottle or two of booze. And thank you for taking my father a few years after his own father went down. Thank you, Mercy. Mercy, thank you for not smoking meth with your mother. Oh, thank you for leaving and for coming back. And thank you for what inside my friend's love bursts like a throng of roadside goldenrod, gleaming into the world, likely hauling a shovel with her, like one named Arely Ott, with hands big as a horse's, and who, like one named Arely Ott, will laugh time to time till the juice runs from her nose. Oh, thank you for the way a small thing's wail makes the milk, or what once was milk in us, gather into horses huckle-buckling across a field. And thank you, friends, when last spring the hyacinth bells rang and the crocuses flaunted their upturned skirts and a quiet roved the beehive, which when I entered were snugged 2 or 3 dead fist-sized clutches of bees between the frames, almost clinging to one another. This one's tiny head pushed into another's tiny wing, one's forelegs resting on another's face, the translucent paper of their wings fluttering beneath my breath, and when a few dropped to the frames beneath, honey. And after falling down to cry, everything's glacial shine. And thank you, too. And thanks for the corduroy couch I have put you on. Put your feet up. Put your feet up. Here's a light blanket. A pillow, thank you. A pillow, dear ones. For I think this is going to be long. I can't stop my gratitude, which includes, dear readers, you for staying here with me, for moving your lips just so as I speak. Here's a cup of tea. I have spooned honey into them. And thank you, the tiny bee's shadow, perusing these words as I write them. And the way my love talks quietly when in the hive, so quietly, in fact, you cannot hear her, but only notice barely her lips moving in conversation. Thank you, what does not scare her in me, but makes her reach my way. Thank you, the love she is, which hurts sometimes. And the time she misremembered elephants in one of my poems, which, oh, here they come. Garlanded with morning glory and wisteria blooms, trombones all the way down to the river. Thank you, in which the river bends around the elephant's solemn trunk, polishing stones, floating on its gentle back, the flock of geese flying overhead. And to the quick and gentle flocking of men, to the old lady falling down on the corner of Fairmount and 18th, holding patiently with the softest parts of their hands her cane and purple hat, gathering for her the contents of her purse and touching her shoulder and elbow. And thank you to the cockeyed basketball court on which, in a half-court 3-on-3, we old heads made of some runny-nosed kids a shambles. And the 61-year-old, after flipping a reverse layup off a backdoor cut from my no-look pass to seal the game, ripped off his shirt and threw punches at the gods and hollered at the kids to admire the pacemaker's grin across his chest. Thank you, the glad accordion's wheeze in the chest. Thank you, the bagpipes. Thank you to the woman barefoot in a gaudy dress for stopping her car in the middle of the road, and the tractor trailer behind her, and the van behind it, whisking a turtle off the road. Thank you, God of Gaudy. Thank you, Paisley Panties. Thank you, the organ up my dress. Thank you, the sheer dress you wore kneeling in my dream at the creek's edge and the light swimming through it. The coy kissing halos into the glassy air. The room in my mind with the blinds drawn where we nearly injure each other crawling into the shawl of the other's body. Thank you when I just say it plain. We fuck each other dumb. And you, again you, for the true kindness it has been for you to remain awake with me like this. Nodding time to time and making that noise, which I take to mean yes. Or I understand. Or please, go on, but not too long. Or why are you spitting so much? Or easy, tiger, hands to yourself. I'm excitable. I'm sorry. I'm grateful. I just want us to be friends now. Forever. Take this bowl of blackberries from the garden. The sun has made them warm. I picked them just for you. I promise I will try to stay on my side of the couch. And thank you, the baggie of dreadlocks I found in a drawer while washing and folding the clothes of a murdered friend. The photo in which his arms slung around the sign to the Trail of Silences. Thank you, the way before he died, he held his hands open to us, for coming back in a waft of incense or in the shape of a boy in another city looking from between his mother's legs, or disappearing into the stacks after brushing by, for moseying back in dreams where, seeing us lost and scared, he put his hand on our shoulders and pointed us to the temple across town. And thank you to the man all night long hosing a mist on his early bloomed peach tree so that the hard frost not waste the crop. The ice in his beard and the ghosts lifting from him when the warming sun told him, sleep now. Thank you, the ancestor who loved you before she knew you by smuggling seeds into her braid for the long journey. Who loved you before he knew you by putting a walnut tree in the ground. Who loved you before she knew you by not slaughtering the land. Thank you, who did not bulldoze the ancient grove of dates and olives. Who sailed his keys into the ocean and walked softly home. Who did not fire. Who did not plunge the head into the toilet. Who said, stop, don't do that. Who lifted some broken someone up, who volunteered. The way the plum tree that marched beside the raised bed in my garden is called a volunteer. Like the arugula that marched itself between the blueberries. Nary a bayonet, nary an army, nary a nation. Which usage of the word volunteer, familiar to gardeners, the wide world, made my pal shout oh and dance and plunge his knuckles into the lush soil before gobbling 2 strawberries and digging a song from his guitar made of wood from a tree someone planted. Thank you, and thank you who witnessed you necessary, who witnessed you beautiful, who witnessed you face deep in the magnolia bloom, nose gold dusted from the pollen you borrowed from the bees, who witnessed you loved, who witnessed you loved, who witnessed you loved, who witnessed you necessary and tumbling with delight, who witnessed you holding your beloved friend's face in your hands, weeping with joy, who witnessed you, who witnessed you, who witnessed you in the cove of your sorrow, witnessed you necessary, witnessed you unmurderable. You unmurderable, witnessed alive and barefoot and cackling with the birds in the garden's fragrant racket. Thank you, Zinnia and Gooseberry, Rebecca and Paw, Ashmead's Colonel, Coxcomb and Scarlet Runner, Feverfew and Lemon Balm. Thank you, Knitbone and Sweetgrass and Sunchoke and False Indigo, whose petals stammered apart by bumblebees. Good Lord, give me a minute. And Moonglow and Catkin and Crookneck and Painted Tongue and Seed Pod and Johnny Jump Up. Thank you, what in us brackets glad, what glad brackets us. And thank you to this knuckle-headed heart, this pelican heart, this gap-toothed heart flinging open its gaudy maw to the sky. Oh, clumsy, oh, bumblefucked, oh, giddy, oh, dumbstruck, oh, rickshaw, oh, goat twisting its head at me from my peach tree's highest branch, balanced and possibly gobbling the last fruit, its tongue working like an engine, a lone sweet drop tumbling by some miracle into my mouth like the smell of someone I've loved. Heart like an elephant screaming at the bones of its dead. Heart like the lady on the bus, dressed head to toe in gold, the sun shivering her shiny boots, singing Erykah Badu to herself, leaning her head against the window. And thank you to the way my father one time came back in a dream by plucking the two cables beneath my chin like a bass fiddle strings and played me until I woke singing. No kidding, I was singing and smiling. Thank you. Thank you, stumbling into the garden where the Juneberry's flowers had burst open like the bells of French horns. The lily my mother and I planted oozed into the air. The bazillion ants labored in their earthen workshops below. The collard greens waved in the wind like the sails of ships, and the wasps swam in the mint bloom's viscous swill. And you, again you, for hanging tight, friends. I know I can be long-winded sometimes. I want so badly to rub the sponge of gratitude over every last thing, which includes you. Which, yes, is awkward. Little crystals of soap going behind your glasses, down your shirt. Soon it will be over. Which is precisely what the child in my dream said, holding my hand, pointing at the roiling sea and the sky, hurtling our way like so many buffalo, who said, "It's much worse than we think." And sooner, to whom I said, "No duh, child in my dreams." What do you think this singing and shuddering is? What this screaming and reaching and dancing and crying is, other than loving what every second goes away? Goodbye, I mean to say, and thank you every day.
So I lied. I'm sorry, Adriana. I ended up not being able to stop it. Once he got into it, I couldn't stop it. Felt like it would be kind of criminal to stop in the middle of such a great reading. So we can listen to a little bit of the Bon Iver one too, which is cool. And you can listen to one now. Was anybody following along in their book? Just me? He added a whole section. So that's interesting to me. The section about witnessing, I think, yes, I think comes on page 91. He just added a whole section on witnessing. It was probably another half a page long. Right, so what do you think?
There was a few things I really liked. First, I've never really heard a poet read the way he does.
Mm-hmm.
He really adds humor, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And I really like the shift in tone. Like at the beginning of the poem is where I noticed it the most, how he was all loud and like humorous, and then the part about like people dying, and then he got soft.
Right.
And I also, the part about the bees, and I don't really like bees, but it made me feel bad for them, like dead and the little tiny wing, his head resting on it. I was like, oh. And there's one more thing I was going to say, but I think I forgot it. So if I think of it, I'll.
I also really liked all the humor. The bee story made me really sad. Because I guess, like, I don't really think about bees like that. But I know that they're just super important for the environment. So we kind of should be thinking like that. And I guess it kind of just made me think a little bit more deeply about just little things like that. I also liked the part about the ancestors. That was super cool.
Yes. Yes. Has anybody here done a gratitude list? I've done this thing quite a lot. It's something that I do when I'm in a bad mood or feeling sorry for myself. I do these gratitude lists, you know, and I think it's pretty interesting that this then becomes, you know, a poem, you know.
I remembered what I was gonna say. I also really liked how parts of it I wasn't following along in my book, but you couldn't tell whether he was actually just like saying it like to speak to the crowd or if it was part of the poem.
Yeah.
I found that really interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. So he read at a place where some friends of mine they hosted him, and this is before I was hip to him. This is right when the book came out, and I was like, I can't go to another reading, and I didn't go, and I was really bummed out afterwards. But I think this kind of intimacy that he establishes with his audience is pretty genuine. Like he's just a pretty genuine person, and I'm really impressed by that. I'm impressed by that. I'm moved by it. I think it's what makes this so great is not because it's like the way he ends the poem is not like, oh, everything's fine because we're grateful. It's kind of pure darkness and shit, but that's exactly why we should be grateful. You know, we should still attend with gratitude, and that this is exactly what we should be doing. And as several people point out, let's just take the bees for an example. You know, if it makes us more aware of bees, you know, yeah, awesome. What a great poem. Made us more aware of bees. By the way, I think bees also function in literary tradition as meaning societies. So I think that's pretty interesting that he sees this darkness in society. So most famously in a poem by Virgil, you get you get this this motif of bees moving about and in perfect harmony in society, and it's sort of supposed to be an image of a good society, and in this poem, it's an image of kind of gratitude and sadness, right? Producing the honey, etc. Are there other people on the poem, or the reading, I should say, and the poem?
I like how he broke the third wall a lot and involved the audience, because a lot of poets, when they read, they just kind of read what's on the page.
Yes.
And he made a point to like include them, so they felt like they were part of it.
He did, and it's such another risky move, isn't it? To write "Dear Readers" into a poem. It just feels so old-fashioned-y, but so great.
Yeah, it kind of goes along with what you said earlier when he does the cliche rhymes occasionally. Like sometimes he takes that cliche like concept and he can make it new.
Yeah, he makes it new. He makes it completely okay. How wonderful is that? You know, there's a poet named David Anton who says there's nothing wrong with a cliche. A cliche is like a pencil. You just need to make it. What happens with cliches when they run out is they need to be sharpened. So the only problem with a cliche is when it's dull, you know, and you need to sharpen the pencil. I wanted to talk also about our bodies. So many of you know that I started, in some ways my life started for real when I got a guitar at 11 years old. And that was the first thing that I loved, that made me feel really, I mean, I loved my family, but I mean, the first thing that made me feel like I had something that was mine and was special. But what I love about poetry is that you don't need anything except your body. And it is kind of, your body is part of the poem. And I think when we watch these readers read, their bodies are part of the poem. That's so beautiful to me, that you just are coming with this thing you can't get rid of. It's like aging sack of stuff that is you, and I love that, and that he seems very aware of it, and as does, I think, the other two readers, especially Daniel Smith also seems very aware of it, partly I suppose because he's also living with AIDS, but they're also living with AIDS. Anyway, I just was thinking about his body, how much he references it in this book. Miguel, you have any thoughts? I haven't heard from you.
Nothing that hasn't already been said at the current moment.
I'll say one thing about that I wonder if we had Ross Gay here and we said, Ross Gay, what do you think about Allen Ginsberg? I wonder what he would say, because even though they seem very different as poets, there's something about his breath control and how long his breath goes until he stops and then he restarts again. I would say two poets that knew each other. One is Amiri Baraka and the other is Allen Ginsberg. Both really worked with the musicality of the line and the musicality of the voice and the body. And I just noticed when he reads how he takes it right to that point where the line goes right to the last end of the breath and then it stops. So breath pause, Okay, let's listen to a little bit of the Bon Iver piece. I don't want to do all of it just because I think that's a lot of passively viewing stuff, but I would like to just get a bit of it. And then what I thought we would do is I'll say a few last things and probably close early. So let's go ahead and
Please.
okay. It sounds immediately like Bonnie Iver.
Friends, will you bear with me today? For I have awakened from a dream in which a robin made with its shabby wings a kind of veil, behind which it shimmied and stomped something from the south of Spain, its breast aflare, looking me dead in the eye from the branch that grew into my window, coochie-cooing my chin, the bird shuffling its little talons left, then right, while the leaves bristled against the plaster wall, two of them drifting onto my blanket, while the bird opened and closed its wings like a matador giving up on murder, jutting its beak, turning a circle, and flashing again the ruddy bombast of its breast, by which I knew upon waking It was telling me, in no uncertain terms, to bellow forth the tubas and sousaphones, the whole rusty brass band of gratitude not quite dormant in my belly. It said so in a human voice. Bellow forth! And who among us could ignore such odd and precise counsel? Hear ye! Hear ye! I am here to holler that I have hauled tons, by which I don't mean lots, I mean tons, of cow shit, and stood ankle deep in swales of maggots, swirling the spent beer grains the brewery man was good enough to dump off, holding his nose, for they smell very bad, but make the compost writhe giddy and lick its lips, twirling dung with my pitchfork again and again with hundreds and hundreds of other people. We dreamt an orchard this way, furrowing our brows and hauling our wheelbarrows and sweating through our shirts. And less than a year later, there was a party at which trees were sunk into the well-fed earth, one of which, a Liberty apple, after being watered in, was tamped by a baby barefoot, with a bow hanging in her hair, biting her lip in her joyous work. And friends, this is the realest place I know. It makes me squirm like a worm. I am so grateful. You could ride your bike there, or roller skate, or catch the bus. There is a fence and a gate twisted by hand. There is a fig tree taller than you in Indiana. It will make you gasp. It might make you want to stay alive even. Thank you. And thank you for not taking my pal when the engine of his mind dragged him to swig fistfuls of Xanax and a bottle or two of booze. And thank you for taking my father a few years after his own father went down. Thank you, Mercy. Mercy, thank you for not smoking meth with your mother. Oh, thank you. Thank you for leaving and for coming back. And thank you for what inside my friend's love bursts like a throng of roadside goldenrod gleaming into the world, likely hauling a shovel with her like one named Aralee Ott, with hands big as a horse's, and who, like one named Aralee Ott, will laugh time to time till the juice runs from her nose. Oh, thank you for the way a small thing's wail makes the milk, or what once was milk in us, gather into horses huckle-buckling across a field. And thank you, friends, when last spring the hyacinth bells rang and the crocuses flaunted their upturned skirts, and a quiet roved the beehive, which, when I entered, were snugged 2 or 3 dead, fist-sized clutches of bees between the frames, almost clinging to one another. This one's tiny head pushed into another's tiny wing, one's forelegs resting on another's face, the translucent paper of their wings fluttering beneath my breath, and when a few dropped to the frames beneath, honey. And after falling down to cry, everything's glacial shine.
Okay, I'm going to stop it there. That's beautiful too, yeah? Almost a completely different feeling. Almost a completely different feeling. And God bless Justin Vernon too for always being in the right place with the right sounds. So, anybody else have any comments on that and the difference there? No humor.
I almost feel like voice, like animation, because it's just a very warm, inviting voice in that version of it.
Mm-hmm. Right. I'm very aware not only of the music, which seemed appropriate, but also the use of the images seemed sometimes to mesh and sometimes to go against what was being said. And I think that's a beautiful way to use images in poetry. To use images too precisely, you know what I mean? To like try to have the image correspond to the word would be kind of a mess. I like the way that they kind of allow the images. When I started doing like video poems, that was my thing. I was like, I don't even want to be thinking about how they go in. I'm going to put them in randomly. And there seemed to be a random element here and some non-random. Other comments?
I agree that it gives off like a completely different like feeling. Even without the humor, just the sound in the background and his tone of voice, it's more like serene, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
No, I like that word serene. I think that there is serenity. There is some serenity here. There's also some there the sadness. Gratitude is always like, I'm grateful for this thing which is here now and won't be here might not be here tomorrow, right? There's always a little bit of that sense of loss. You have to almost, you know how we talked about drinking the water, making a fountain? You almost have to hold your gratitude like this and let it like evaporate or drink up or fall through your fingers or whatever, because it's not, to hold it like this, you can't be grateful, you know. You can't, it doesn't work. I think that's, and I think his voice is exactly pitch perfect for this kind of a, this reading of it. Any other comments before? Well, I'll just say, you know, a book like this happens once in a blue moon. I think the other book that happened like this recently was a book by Claudia Rankine called Citizen. And these two books taken together, I think, both by African Americans, sort of, they sort of mark out the 2010s. I actually think they really do. They was a point at which, yeah, so it was I think they both are sort of important for the 2010s. So, I guess if there's no further comments, then we'll say that that's it for today. I want to say that we have poems coming for Thursday, and if you have not done the discussion post on negative capabilities in its children, please try to do it. There's one more discussion post, which will, I think, be our last, due on Saturday. That's Ron Silliman's The New Sentence. And then after that, and I'm a little late in catching up with them, after that, we're going to have a period of time where we have a lot of response to each other's poems. Those will be the main discussion posts. We'll be responding to each other's poems so that there's, we can take lots of ideas from each other and sort of plant them and let them grow into our final manuscripts, okay? Any questions or concerns? All right, well, I'm still on the old time zone, so I'm gonna go eat my lunch now, even though it's a little late. It's so good to see you all. See you on Thursday, and thanks for hanging in there. Bye.